Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Schnell, the Canadian technician, here to host the Market Buzz. This show looks at weekly setups across the U.S. market. Using the tools available on StockCharts, we'll look for long time frame trades. Please subscribe to my articles and Twitter feed for updates through the week. Okay, so our bull market is bulling. We have pushed up. Monday was a big down day, and started to fire up basically Tuesday, and we've been climbing every day since. But I think the important thing Tuesday we had a down day because Monday was a holiday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday we ran up. But I think the important thing to note is that the change in tone from the negotiations on China is probably one of the biggest reasons that things are starting to fire up. And so what I want to cover off today, I promised last week that after we had the month-end close, I'd go through the charts for the rest of the world. And the month-end, actually, the charts improved dramatically last week. And that was one of the reasons for my mood change in terms of my sentiment on the weekly market review. So today we're going to quickly go through some global charts, and I want to point out some really interesting things that I don't think anybody in the fundamental world has started to look at yet, and some of the things that the charts are starting to tell us. So big picture, long-term stuff, but really exciting. And I've got some China trade thoughts and maybe some ideas on places to look and if this was going to be successful, where we might want to play. One of those would be industrial metals. Another would be China stocks directly. And then, again, I'm looking on a big long-term picture for commodities to bottom here. And we want to talk about that specifically. Now that gold is broken out, one of the things that happened in '01 was gold started to break out, and then it rolled back down, and then it took off for its big run. And maybe that's what we're about to get now, is a little bit of a setback in gold. But that would be time to recharge the engine, not to abandon the sector. So let's jump into those charts, because we're going to cover off lots today. So the one thing that has surprised me this year, calendar year 2019, is how resilient the commodity country charts have been in the face of declining trade with China and the US. So we're going to cover that off specifically. But here's Brazil, and you can just see, last week we came down, touched this trend line perfectly, and where did we bounce? Right where we would like it to bounce. So that was really nice to see. We still have a really high PPO up around 2, so anything turning up around here, that would be perfect. I think the one thing that surprises me is literally we just drew the trend line and we've broken it, 2 weeks ago or whatever, and now all of a sudden it's turning right around. We're back above both the 40-week and the 20-week moving average, so that'd be the center of the Bollingers. And we look good here. This is really a nice place to be long. So when we get into nice situations like this, we just want to go through, but there's 4 commodity charts that I want you to see. Here's Russia, and look at what Russia's doing. And we'll find this on a lot of these charts, is the countries around China are actually rallying huge. So not just China stocks, but you might want to be looking at something from South Korea, something from Japan, Russia. These charts really look good. But look at this surge in Russia. I mean, it literally launched off the charts back above the 20-week, turning up here above 0. So again, these are commodity countries. Everybody thinks they're all bombed out. And yet the turn we're getting here in the PPO above 0, this is as bullish as it gets. So if commodities can start to rally here, that would catch most people offside. But I actually think the trade is looking good. Here's Australia, known as the commodity supplier to Asia. And you can see we held these lows for 4 weeks, and I mentioned it last week, was one of the things that surprises me is how well these commodity countries have done. So while the overall market was making lower lows every week, so it didn't make lower intra-week lows, but it had lower closing lows every week. And then last week started to push higher, and then this week higher again. This has held up really well, and Australia looks like it's turning back up here. So have to like that. Look at how high the PPO is. And, you compare that to even the S&P PPO, which has been declining somewhat. This thing's been holding up very robustly. So here's the TSX Canadian market, and look at this. We're trying to break out to new all-time highs this week, which is very surprising. And look at how strong the PPO is. So I was expecting the Canadian market literally to go boom, 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 straight down like it did in October. And it just kept holding right here at the 40-week moving average. And sure enough, here we go. Nice big reversal. Last week, it closed above the prior month and took off to the upside. So this is very bullish. And to see all of these commodity charts behave this well, I think is a big clue for us. Now, here's the Shanghai. It doesn't get any better. I've been watching this PPO sitting here. Look at this rising histograms for 3 weeks already, and it's starting to turn up, and it looks like it's going to give us a bull cross right above zero. That's as tasty as it gets. That's prime rib on a barbecue. This is really, really nice. So we have this downtrend that's been broken. We're back above the 40 and the 20 week. This thing wants to move higher. Here's the Hang Seng with all the riots and everything. Or not riots, the demonstrations. It's broke down. It's been holding, even though all of the pressure it's had, and now it's turning and starting to move back up again. The PPO below zero here is not good, but look at how high this wave would be compared to the prior wave if this, in fact, is our bottom. And if everything else is going to run out, expect this one to follow along. Here's the Kospi. Look at this thing jump off the chart. So this is South Korea. And again, you've got this downtrend here in momentum, slight turn up here. So you'd have a higher low in momentum and a lower low in price. That's positive divergence. That's the kind of thing we'd look for. But seeing everything in this Asia region start to jump, Russia, South Korea, here's Japan. It's jumping right back through this resistance layer that's been really dogging it. And the PPO is just below zero. It looks like it wants to start to turn up here. So all of this just looks so good in terms of the area in Asia. Here's Indonesia, and you can just see it hasn't broken out yet. It's holding right at its 20-week and 40-week, so that's one we could probably watch, but the PPO is setting up nicely above zero. And really, it hasn't done anything for 2 years, so if this was going to start to break out, that would be a big positive. Okay, here's India. And one of the things that we've been wondering about is India has been weak for a while. It actually broke down in June was its high, early June. And so it's been faltering or falling for a little bit. But it hasn't done anything for 6 weeks. So we'll have to wait and get a little more data on where India wants to go here. But I would suspect any breakout on India, you probably want to be involved in. Europe has had lousy PMI numbers. Manufacturing slowdown in Germany. This chart started its rally 3 or 4 weeks ago already, and we're going to break above the 20-week moving average here. That's as good as it gets. This is really nice. Look at where the PPO is turning up, right above zero. That's a beautiful bounce location. We saw this back in 2017. It was like a beautiful 8-week rally. We'll see if we get the same sort of thing coming off the August lows. So this sets up beautifully. And again, the charts were trying to tell us they wanted to turn last week, and this week they're following through. Here's France. And one of the things you see here, this chart's been going sideways for 2 years, like the TSX. So like the US market's been basically hovering around this 26 to 3,000 level, just to pick some rough levels. Wandering sideways, and this looks like it's ready to go here. It's just had a sudden surge, and so for all the weakness touted in Europe and the fact that they have to do monetary easing and everything else, this chart's already pricing it in, and they're off to the races. England, so good old United Kingdom, what we see here, look at where the PPO is trying to bounce right at zero. So for all the talk of Brexit, all of the no Brexit, everything else, this chart, literally launching, moving above the trading area of the last 4 weeks. I would say it's not as positive as the rest of the charts, but it's still doing a lot more than I'm sure all of us would expect. Here's Italy. Rising lows, looks like it's about to break out. Wouldn't take much to get to new one-year highs in Italy for all the bad news on their budgets and governments and everything else. This thing looks like it wants to go higher. So hard to argue with this. Look where the PPO wants to turn up, right above zero. That's bullish. So as sour as the news is, the chart seems to be turning rather quickly. And to my surprise, I actually thought everything would break down a little bit harder in August, well, a lot harder in August. And when it just started to hold for 2 or 3 weeks, it we were having lower closes, but we weren't making lower intra-week lows. Now all of a sudden we're breaking to the upside, and a lot of these charts worldwide started to show that. So don't get too bearish on this stuff. It looks like it really wants to climb. Here's the PPO for the S&P 500. And as you can see, we were making lower lows here than we were making prior. So that's not bullish usually when we're making lower lows, but it's still well above zero. And it looks like it wants to turn back up here. And we're going to go back and challenge this 3,000 level. Nasdaq 100 already above its last 1 month and wants to break higher. PPO had broken this uptrend line, starting to turn down, but the histogram's now improving for 2 weeks. That's pretty bullish, and again, it looks like it wants to go through prior highs with the support of the rest of the world. So that positive news we got out of China on late last week has really started to turn, and I think I mentioned in my newsletter that if we were going to start to get any sort of positive information out of the U.S.-China trade talks, this market would really rocket higher. And it's not one market, it's all the markets in the world. And again, the Shanghai turning up right at zero, the charts are trying to tell us there's more momentum there than we think. So don't get too tied up on listening to the mainstream media news. Watch the charts, and I think they're telling us that things are getting a lot better. Here's crude this week, and one of the things I want to point out is this big outside bar. So we tested lower, we tested higher, and we're in the top half of the range here. That's a pretty bullish bar. It doesn't have to close. As long as it doesn't fall from here, that would be great. Now it's going to trade down a little bit today so far. But if it stays in the middle of the range, that would be okay. But what we'd like to see, obviously, is this to start to turn. You can see that there's a trend line across the top of energy here, and if this started to turn higher, that would be a big deal. So anyway, I think there's lots there, and I really hope that you see what I see, that all of these charts are starting to improve. Here's copper, and the one thing I'll say on copper is that it started to break down, and I mentioned it, last week or whatever. If there was an opportunity for this chart to really start to fall, this was it. It could literally have spiked down like it did over here, just fall, breaking down hard. And it didn't. It fell a little bit and then started to hold. Now, horizontal resistance at 2.5, you could argue that, but that's 2 years ago back here. So we'd broken below last year's low. We were at new 2-year lows, and all of a sudden this thing wants to rebound. And look at the PPO. It's gently sloping down and looks like it wants to turn up here already. So this would be positive divergence with a higher low on momentum and a lower low on price. That's textbook stuff that we look for a market reversal. And we've got this gradual slope here. If we start to break this to the upside, I think that's very bullish. And you can see back here in 2016, we had that gradual slope down, started to turn to the upside, and that was a pretty good place to get on board. So after we come back, I'm going to cover off some of the other areas that I want to show you in the market. I'm going to briefly get into materials and into some specific China names that you might be interested in. So with that, we'll break for commercial and see you in a few seconds. Okay, we're back, and I'm on a chart list that is for industrial metals. And one of the things that I would expect to happen is these commodities start to turn higher. And again, they've been suppressed for a while, but the commodity-related countries with the low interest rates have been turning up. And so I think if we get this commodity thrust, that would be something to look for. That would be very helpful. I'm going to go get one chart, and the one thing I want to show you on this chart here, just $AORD:SPX. And there's one reason that I want to show this one specifically. I'm going to break the chart into a 30 or a 40-year period. And let's get rid of the high-low close bars and just go with a solid line. And one of the things that you'll see on this chart is see how this big downtrend was here in Australia relative to the US, and near the bottom here, it took a few years to base, but it started to take off. Maybe it's just me, but I think this downtrend looks a lot like this downtrend. And if you look at the timing in here, as this started to pick up, this was a really nice place to get on board. So doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it definitely suggests that this is the time to look. If things were going to start to get dicey again, you can see down here at the bottom, the PPO rolled over and we fell apart, and we're right at that level. We can also see back here in 2001, the PPO moved up into positive territory. I mean, this is the first time in 4 or 5 years this chart's been up here. This is the ratio against the S&P 500. And if you start to see this chart take off to the upside on the positive news out of the U.S.-China trade talks, I think there could be a big rip in commodities. So we want to stay focused on that. And this is one of the background charts, when you just kind of take price away from everything and just say what's starting to outperform, we see this trend change starting to develop here. So it's at least a place to look. This chart I made this morning, or chart list, this is industrial metals. And what happens on industrial metals, unfortunately, it's very mixed. And so I stripped out all the charts under $1, but if we just hit the percentage change button, you can see that we have just as many losers as we have winners today, but some of those are in gold. And the other thing we want to focus on is, let's just say for the week now, looking across some of these names, Intrepid Potash or something like that, these charts are all starting to bounce. Here's First Quantum Minerals, new 52-week lows, just like copper was, right? But all of a sudden, all of these charts are starting to turn. So if it's too early for you to enter, I fully get that, but it's a place to look. And here's BHP Billiton. After breaking down to new 6-month lows, it looks like it wants to start to turn higher. Teck Resources had a big zinc mine failure, but that's a rare earth metal, so this could start to turn up. These are some of the bigger names. Here's Rio Tinto. All of a sudden, in the last week, they've all started to reverse in a big way. Like this thing's up, 10% in a few weeks. So looking across here, just going through these charts, I think there's some opportunities. And look what's starting to fall apart. In this case, under the materials group, a lot of times the industrial metals will get put into general mining, but gold miners might get put in there too. So here's, Platinum Group, which has been related to gold mining. Fortuna Silver, again, all of the precious metals are down this week. Don't get too bearish on them. Let them pull back and find a place that you'd like to look at them. And when we start to get our next run in gold, that might be a beautiful place to get on board. But a lot of the gold names are breaking down here. So at the end of 1 week, you can see clearly that all of the industrial metals started to outperform and all of the precious metals pulled back more significantly or didn't outperform this week. So I think there's something real to kind of focus on there. And if we're going to get the turn in these industrial metals, again, commodities, you want to buy them very close to the low. You don't want to wait for 52-week highs. You want to buy them very close to the low and as they start to break out. Now, if some of these charts are holding up near the highs and then they start to break out already, that would be fantastic. And the other thing about this change this week, because it's a global change and we're not talking little percentages, all of the charts that we just looked through, those weekly charts, all had huge bars. There's definitely a momentum trend change happening. And when that happens, what you want to do is scan for any stocks that made new highs this week and go through and just see what's breaking out. And if you start to see some stocks perking up right now, they're going to be some of the leaders for the next phase. So it's a great time to be hunting and not be too pessimistic because we're starting to see the change. Now, this is a chart list I had from years ago called the materials sector, and it has 130 charts in it. Some of them are too low price, but the general point I want to make is, materials have been declining for a year and a half while the trade dispute has been going on. And when you label your charts, it's important to put big things on your charts just so you can remind yourself. So I have a chart over on a chart list I look at every week. And on that chart list, I put, tariffs, and I put it right on China, the Chinese chart, the Shanghai, and put tariffs. And then I put second round of tariffs, and I put third round of tariffs. And when you see those big flags, like they were major momentum changes, and it doesn't necessarily happen that week, but all of a sudden it starts to show up. In the case of the first set of tariffs, it really did mark the top back in January of 2018, and since then the market has gone nowhere. So I would encourage you to make sure you're putting those marks on the charts. Now here's Alcoa daily, and you can see that this thing has been a path of ugly. $17 down from 50, so 70% discount. Here's aluminum, and literally, the tariff started back in here, and all of a sudden, or the tariff talks started back in here, and all of a sudden, it took one final high. So this looks pretty good, but it literally shot up for 1 week, probably an earnings announcement, and then gave it all back, and has been falling ever since. So we're starting to see this really turn up here from $16 to $20 relatively quick, right? Last week's low to this week's high. So you're up 20% or something already in Alcoa. And looking at those changes, I mean, these are big moves. But again, if this was going to start, if all of a sudden we did get a trade agreement between the two countries, this chart would be up at $30 before the trade agreement signed, and then it would be adding on the second half. So that's a place to look. I think all of the material stocks, I've got lithium up here as well if you wanted to go into some of these names, and just, here's a percent change. Avalon Rare Metals, I mean, these are 5-cent stocks, so it's hard to get very excited about it. But here's SQM, one of the big mineral providers, and looking through these charts, just check them out and see if there's anything there for you. I have trouble getting too worried about a 4-cent stock dropping 1 cent, looking really, really ugly. But the idea would be just, go and try and find some stuff related. And again, it might be Russia, it might be South Korea. There's a whole bunch of things based on those early charts. So this is a chart list I created back in the early spring, where I thought we might have some improvement in Chinese trade relations, and then that fell apart. So here's China Mobile, been pulling back, new 5-year lows after breaking out 2-year highs. Literally the next week started down, and always good when you're breaking through a prior high to check. But there's some nice names in here. So some of the gambling names might do very well in Macau and that kind of thing. So that might be an area to look if we start to see some optimism. Here's NetEase breaking out to new 3-month highs, and wouldn't take much to hit a new 1-year high and almost 2-year high. I guess just 1 year. Anyway, you get the idea. This chart literally turned on a dime. PPO bouncing off zero. This is bullish. This is a great place to look. 10-cent holdings. PPO right near zero. Any sort of a bounce up here, that would be another nice place to get on the board. Carvana didn't care, but it's starting to break out to new 52-week highs as we speak. And this stock closing at new 52-week highs this week and right at the top of the range would suggest more breakout to come. Here's 58.com. This one's been trending down for 1.5 years. If it could start to move up, it's just something to look for. Here's YY, and you can see this chart was new 52-week lows just 4 weeks ago and starting to turn up here. If it got back above the 10-week moving average, your full stochastic starting to move up again, something like that might be worth looking at. Alibaba, I love this chart. This has just been a narrowing wedge or pennant, and a breakout to the upside here if it gets through 179.88, and it's trading at 177.36. That would give it new 4-month highs. So really nice. Look at the PPO just grinding to zero here, and we saw this back before it broke out in 2016, and it went on a beautiful run from 85 to 211. So the stock's got lots of potential. Looks good to me. TAL Education Group. Anyway, I'm throwing out ideas, not telling you to go buy any of these, do your own homework, but these charts are all set up here. And if China was going to be a story for us, then, PPO is bouncing off zero right in here. This is a nice place to look. Here's VIP Shop Holdings, trying to break out to new 52-week highs, wouldn't take much. China Petroleum Corporation, again, commodities, if they turned around, started to break the downtrend in momentum, that would be bullish. New Oriental Education and Technology Group. This one's breaking out to new all-time highs as we speak. Last week it looks like it put it on, and this week it's holding up there. So that's another bullish. C-Trip, China Tourism Company. If that could start to make a turn, PPO just at zero here, so that could be important. Momo, this chart stock is stuck sideways, and looks like, the momentum is trying to improve. It's right at zero here. If we all of a sudden start to get some thrust up, that would be bullish. It says it's negative on the week by, less than 1%, but it's trying to break through here. So any sort of push above 37.73 would give you new 3-month highs and a turn. So lots of these Chinese names are set up. This one's got a PPO cross at the bottom here after sliding for the whole time frame since the tariffs were announced. So this might be one of those charts that actually starts to get it going. A break above $45 would put it at new 3-month highs. Weibo, this one's really nice. PPO giving you a signal. The volume's been coming in lately, so some people are starting to see some optimism here. And this one's already started to run. Had a big week so far. We're up 13% on the week. But again, it was down to $34. It was $142 a year ago. So there's a bit of ride room ahead. Auto Home, been grinding sideways, starting to break out. JD.com, this chart has rallied early in the year and didn't really give it back in here. So this could be a nice chart to watch for a break to the upside. Again, it wouldn't take much to get to 52-week highs. Baidu, this chart still bombed out, 284 to 100. I think the more important thing here is letting the stock base and try to get on board when you like the shape. But I think there's some other names there that look a little bit better. Here's Chinese internet companies or tech-related companies, and this looks like it wants to start to break out, moving above both moving averages. PPO is giving us positive cross this week. Timing looks pretty good. Changyu, this one really fell out of bed. I think I'd let somebody else own that while it's sleeping. Here's Haiyu, and you're sitting here at $25 trying to get through it. All of these charts have nice chart shapes that would be important. This is a new IPO, and this chart looks like it wants to start to fire higher. Aurora Mobile. So if you like some of these names, I know I'm going a little bit fast, but if you like these names, you can always go back and look at the recording that they'll post a little bit later today at the office. And once this starts to turn up, you can get on board. Look at this move on this Lex and FinTech, starting to break to the upside. So lots of good reasons to like this one. PPO right at right near zero. And look at the volume starting to hit the stock as it's breaking out. So again, very volatile. This thing opened at 18 and went all the way to 50, or opened at 9 and went all the way to 15 on its opening week, and rallied up to 20, came all the way back to 6, and now here you sit at halfway. So anyway, it looks nice with the way it's setting up. This Pinduoduo has already fired off and is now breaking out to new highs. This is probably one to watch, well, one to own probably as it starts to rip. And here's Qdan. Again, these are all setting up nicely. This one's rolling over a bit in momentum, so I need to see that start to improve. Fang Holdings, this one's coming down. Okay, so I think you're getting the idea, but the main thing to do would be to go into these chart lists and just start to hunt and find the chart shapes you like, and if it's breakouts, buy those. If it's big bases, then buy those. And as they start to roll up, here's the China Tech Fund. So if this was going to start to outperform, you can see it stopped pretty much on the tariffs and rolled down. So thanks for taking the time to join me on Market Buzz. Market Buzz airs live on Wednesdays and Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern and 7:30 p.m. on StockCharts, 7:30 a.m. on StockCharts TV. You can also catch replays on the StockCharts YouTube channel or on StockCharts TV, which has a running list of charting informational shows. And one more thing, I am going to be in San Francisco next week, so feel free to catch me there. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.